You know that feeling. You're trying so hard to build a truly killer team, right? Aiming for those hires who will genuinely change the game.
Yeah, but instead you keep finding candidates who are, well, they're fine. Good enough.
Exactly. Functional, maybe,
Yeah.
but they just don't have that spark you were really looking for.
Uh-huh. If you've ever found yourself staring at piles of just meh resumes or felt that little sinking feeling when a new hire doesn't quite deliver on the promise.
Then you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So today, we're diving deep into a resource that, honestly, might offer a way out of that whole cycle.
We are digging into Hiring Greatness. It's by David E. Perry and Mark J. Haluska. These guys are executive search pros. And check this out. They claim a 99% stick rate.
99%. Think about that. Almost every single executive they place is still there over a year later. I mean, that suggests they've really cracked something, right?
Absolutely. So our mission here in this deep dive into their first few chapters is to pull out those core ideas for really effective recruiting.
We're talking about fundamentally understanding what real value looks like in an employee and how you set up your whole hiring game to actually attract that top-tier talent consistently.
Think of this as your shortcut to building that, powerhouse team, the kind that really crushes the competition.
And to kind of illustrate the sort of standard thinking this book pushes back against, maybe I could share that quick story about an early chat I had with a potential client.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It really shows why you need to ask the right questions from the get-go.
Okay, so picture this. I get a call. Fred Tushinsky runs a manufacturing company, Tulip. Seemed like a pretty standard call, right?
Uh-huh.
But instead of just, firing off a proposal like usual, I ended up getting on a plane to see him.
In person. Okay.
Yeah. And get this. Instead of letting him lead, I walk into his office. I've got a check uncashed, mind you, just making a point, and I immediately hit him with 3 really critical questions.
About what specifically?
About hands-off lists and the real details of his search plan. Fred was, well, he was definitely surprised.
And it's interesting how those 3 questions, which might seem simple, just completely changed the whole dynamic, didn't they?
Totally. It highlights these things people often gloss over when they bring in search help.
Exactly. And those weren't just random questions you pulled out of a hat.
No way.
Yeah.
They go straight to the core of the first big idea we're unpacking from the book, defining value.
Yeah.
Chapter 1 really hammers this shift in thinking.
Right, moving away from just filling a slot that's traditional human resources thinking.
Towards really recognizing the massive, often intangible worth of your people, what they call human capital.
And the authors give some really powerful examples of this intangible value, like David Bowie issuing Bowie bonds.
Oh yeah, that's wild. Selling shares in his future music royalties.
And investors valued his creative potential at over $50 million. It just shows how much worth can be tied to someone's future output.
Right. And then there's DreamWorks SKG. When they went public, boom, $2 billion valuation almost instantly.
And what did they actually have at that point? No studio, no finished movies.
Not even any big stars locked down yet. Their value was almost entirely based on the expected future success, driven by the talent, the reputation of Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen.
It really drives home the point that today, especially for knowledge workers, someone's value is way more than just their salary. It's their innovation, their problem solving, their whole contribution to growth in ways that aren't always, easy to put a number on.
And to help us think about this strategically, the book introduces this idea of a value grid, 3 dimensions.
Right. Height of value, sight of value, and flight of value.
So height of value is about truly understanding the kind of impact you actually need. Sight of value is, finding people who have that.
And flight of value is successfully landing that talent, getting them in the door.
Let's dig into that first one, height of value. The authors are saying, look, you got to move past the standard job requirements. You need to pinpoint the qualities that really lead to exceptional results.
Yeah, they even have this thing called the new value table. It highlights characteristics that, maybe surprisingly, aren't just about chasing the biggest paycheck.
Okay, let's unpack that new value table. We're talking things like a relentless desire to make something new. That inner drive, right? To innovate, not just maintain.
Or high energy enthusiasm. The kind that's infectious, goes beyond just ticking boxes.
And people who feel this internal pride to leave a legacy signature on their work. Like a deep commitment that's more than just collecting that salary.
Exactly. It's about folks who can think around corners, solve problems creatively, who bring current relevant skills, and whose value actually increases over time.
These are the things that really separate the good enough from the truly great.
And the authors stress to even spot these qualities, you need a really deep understanding of your own company, your goals, your culture, the specific hurdles this new person will face.
Which leads right into the second dimension, sight of value.
Yeah.
Actually finding these exceptional people. And this is where the book really takes aim at traditional recruiting methods.
They make this really key distinction. Candidates running from something may be unhappy where they are, or maybe they're out of work.
Versus those who are running to something already successful, but looking for an even bigger, better opportunity.
And here's the kicker. They argue that the real top-tier players, the A players, they're almost never actively looking.
Right. They're probably paid well. They're engaged where they are.
So just throwing up job ads, relying on job boards, you mostly get the people running from something.
Yeah, it becomes this numbers game, but you're not necessarily finding excellence. The book really pushes for proactive research, building real credibility as a recruiter.
You need to be able to talk intelligently about a candidate's industry, their company, their challenges, just to get their attention, let alone get them interested.
It's about becoming someone they actually respect, whose call they'll take, a peer.
And that takes serious time and effort. It's not just asking who do you know. It means dedicating real resources to digging deep, finding the right people, and hitting them with a really compelling pitch.
Okay, so dimension 3, flight of value. Actually convincing that top talent to sign on. And the book's really clear. It's not always just about throwing more money at them.
Precisely. They point to companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, Tesla, SpaceX, places where the mission, the purpose, the chance to be part of something big, something impactful, that's a huge draw.
They talk about understanding what Corey's value. Now, Corey isn't like a specific guy.
No, it's their term for those highly sought-after knowledge workers, what really gets them excited.
According to the book, it's the chance to be the absolute best at what they do, to work alongside other top performers, and ultimately to feel like they're making a real difference.
And this leads into what they call the perfect storm scenario.
Ah, yes, the perfect storm.
That situation so many companies find themselves in, right? Especially when they try to handle a big executive hire internally, they run into predictable problems.
Like what?
Like vague job descriptions, compensation that's totally out of whack with the market, and just generally failing to reach or attract those passive top-tier candidates we were talking about.
And that's the point where they finally realize, okay, we need help. We need an executive search professional, an ESP.
But then the big question is, how do you pick the right ESP? Which brings us right back to those questions you hit Fred Dzerzhinsky with.
Those 4 questions. The book lays them out as absolutely essential before you hire any search firm. The first one is about hands-off restrictions.
Why is that so critical? Understanding their client list.
Well, think about it. Big search firms, they work with tons of companies. And ethically, they can't recruit from their current or recent clients. These hands-off lists are necessary, but...
if they've worked with half your competitors.
Exactly. Their ability to find you the best talent in your specific industry could be seriously hampered. In Fred's case, the 2 firms he'd used before, they had something like 40,000 companies each on their hands-off lists.
Wow, 40,000.
Yeah. They were basically fishing in a tiny pond and hadn't even told Fred about these massive limitations up front.
That really hammers home why you need to know the actual scope of the talent pool they can realistically tap into. Bigger isn't always better here.
Not at all. A smaller, more specialized firm might actually have wider access within your niche because they have fewer conflicts.
Makes sense. Okay, critical question number 2.
Does the ESP truly understand the role you need filled? And this goes way beyond just reading a job description.
The book talks about needing a clear candidate roadmap that everyone agrees on. The ESP has to put in the time up front. Understand your unique culture, the specific challenges, the desired outcomes, both short and long term.
They should be doing what the book calls benchmarking interviews to really get the skills, the experience, and that crucial cultural fit piece. At the executive level, you just can't afford trial and error.
Too costly, too time-consuming. Okay, question 3.
Will an experienced ESP be the one actually doing the search work?
Ah, the old bait-and-switch worry.
Exactly. The book warns you don't get dazzled by some super-polished business development person who then just hands off the real work to a junior team.
Because that initial contact with a potential candidate is everything, right?
Absolutely critical. You need someone with the experience, the industry smarts, the sheer gravitas to get a busy, successful executive who isn't even looking to pay attention.
There's that great anecdote in the book, isn't there, about landing the guy from Motorola.
Oh, yeah. Took 51 phone calls to finally entice this divisional president. 51. That's the kind of persistence and seasoned skill you need.
You need to know exactly who's making those first calls, building those relationships, and who can skillfully circle back to someone who initially says no.
Definitely. Okay, final critical question. The performance guarantee.
Right, protecting your investment. What happens if they don't find anyone suitable?
Or what if the person they find just doesn't work out down the road for whatever reason?
You need clarity up front. What's the warranty period? What's the process for research if needed? Any extra costs involved?
A good ESP, a reputable one, they should have skin in the game. They want to make a successful long-term placement.
So after hashing out value and how to pick the right ESP, you did take on Fred's search, right?
We did. And the next step, which Chapter 2 covers, was setting up the search committee, which meant a trip out to Tulip's facility in Milwaukee.
And that visit, actually seeing the place, it really drove home the importance of understanding the company culture, didn't it?
Totally. You could see Fred had this genuine connection with his people. It wasn't just talk. So it became crystal clear. We needed a COO who could not only do the job, but also really get and nurture that specific culture.
Absolutely critical. And managing an executive search like that, it's a huge commitment, practically a full-time job in itself.
Which is exactly why you need a dedicated search committee. It provides that focus, that oversight.
And the book gives some solid pointers on picking committee members. Things like, have they been successful CEOs or senior leaders themselves? Can they actually commit the time?
Right. Can they evaluate candidates objectively? Can they help persuade top candidates? They also warn about, potential conflicts if you have too many peers on the committee. Keep it focused.
Keep it small, they suggest, like
Yeah.
5 to 7 committed people.
Yeah. And the committee's overall job, their charter, it's pretty straightforward on paper. Confirm the need, set a timeline, get board consensus, create a detailed job description, handle due diligence, manage selection, land the best person.
But maybe the single most vital decision in all of that is choosing the search committee chairperson.
Oh, absolutely crucial. The book strongly pushes for an outside board member, someone a bit removed from the day-to-day internal stuff.
Well, that's internal politics.
Exactly. They need to be a strong leader, impartial, great communicator, someone who can build real rapport with candidates, especially near the end.
And they need to be accessible, right? Proactive, driving the process, getting everyone on the same page.
Definitely. The duties are pretty extensive. Building that emotional connection with the ideal candidate, working with the ESP on timelines, being the main voice for the position profile, managing information flow, gathering feedback.
Evaluating internal candidates too, right? Driving the offer, playing good cop in negotiations sometimes.
Being involved in reference checks, the closing.
Yeah.
And the book makes a great point about their unique ability to articulate the upside, the wealth to be made, especially if it's a funded startup or high-growth situation.
And they offer some really practical tips for managing the whole search effectively, too.
Yeah, things like making sure everyone on the committee is fully engaged, expecting greatness from candidates, but also being realistic about who's out there.
Being, like, ruthlessly curious about progress.
Yes. And exercising, they say, a healthy dose of paranoia during due diligence, really digging in.
And fostering that strong partnership with the ESP, it's got to be collaborative.
It really has to be a team effort. Company and ESP working together, totally open communication, laser focused on that one goal. Find and land that amazing leader who's going to make a huge difference.
Which segues nicely into Chapter 3, preparation, or, as they call it, recruiteronomics.
Yeah, catchy. This chapter really digs into why it's absolutely vital to have a crystal clear, super comprehensive understanding of the job itself, the roles, responsibilities, the whole work environment.
That visit to Tulip's Milwaukee plant you mentioned,
Yeah.
it really brings that to life, doesn't it?
It does. Seeing the operation, meeting people, gives you such a better, more nuanced feel for who would actually fit and what the real opportunity is. Yeah.
Way beyond just words on a page. And they use that powerful story, that cautionary tale, to show the dangers of getting this wrong. The story of Brian, the VP of sales at AMS.
Oh man, that one's rough. The CEO kept talking about perseverance, but they churned through 11 VPs of sales in about 10 years.
With almost no sales growth to show for it.
Right. But Brian, after he finally left AMES, he went on to turn around and sell 2 other companies successfully.
It just screams that the problem wasn't necessarily the VPs. It was likely the role definition, the setup at AMES itself.
Exactly. It underscores the core point. Successful executive search has to start with a really thorough, formal definition of the role. Responsibilities, competencies, KPIs, all tied directly back to the company's strategy.
If you don't have that clear foundation, you're basically just rolling the dice, setting yourself up for failure.
Totally. The job description, the book says, that's your bedrock document.
Yeah.
Everything else, finding people, evaluating them, it all flows from that.
They even suggest using Google as a starting point, just to see examples. Like for Fred's COO search in manufacturing, a quick search brought up, 146,000 results?
Yeah, tons. But obviously, it's not about just copying and pasting.
No way. The book details who should be involved in actually defining the role board, senior execs, usually not peers or subordinates, and maybe getting an impartial facilitator helps.
And the process is about really deconstructing the role, looking at past performance, present needs, future challenges, thinking about industry specifics, the current team's skill set.
And they warn against just blindly copying, say, Google's job descriptions, right? Because your needs, your environment could be totally different.
Totally different. So they cover the basics you need: title, reporting structure, summary, functional requirements, education experience, all that standard stuff.
But then they go deeper, deconstructing the day-to-day responsibilities, the needed leadership style, the actual authority, formal org chart stuff, and the informal networks.
Key performance requirements, the hard skills you can measure, but also the crucial soft skills, personal qualities, cultural fit.
And critically, they emphasize detailed, accurate compensation info. Needs to be based on real, objective market data.
Right, but even that super detailed job description is just step one. Then the book pivots to creating the position profile, the PP.
And this is where they introduce that vital concept, WIFM.
WIFM. What's in it for me? But from the candidate's perspective.
Huge mindset shift right there. You're not just filling a job anymore.
No, you're actively selling an opportunity to someone who's probably already successful and pretty happy where they are.
The book talks about this trend, people wanting more control over their work, wanting something meaningful, impactful.
Yeah, they cite that wild statistic, something like 87% of working Americans wish they had a different job. Think about the cost of all that disengagement.
So the position profile, it takes the facts from the job description and breathes life into it. It's your marketing piece.
Designed specifically to catch the eye, pique the curiosity of those top-tier executives that use that great car analogy.
Right. Fundamentally, all cars get you from A to B, but it's the marketing, the story that creates desire, makes you want that specific car.
Same idea in recruiting top talent, and the book starts outlining the key parts of this killer 5 to 7-page position profile. Now, interestingly, our source material kind of cuts off right there, mid-sentence.
Ha! A perfect cliffhanger. Leaves you, our listener, wondering, what exactly goes into that compelling position profile? What are the magic ingredients that turn a dry JD into an irresistible lure for an A player?
That is definitely something we will tackle in a future deep dive, for sure.
But for now, let's just quickly wrap up what we've pulled out so far from this first look.
Okay, key takeaways. Number one, the absolute critical need to really define value beyond just the basics.
Number two, the strategic importance of a properly set up search committee, especially the chairperson role.
And number three, laying that solid foundation with a thorough, strategy-aligned job description, and then starting to think like a marketer with the position profile, focusing on that what's in it for me.
Ultimately, hiring greatness isn't luck. It's a really meticulous strategic game. It needs a fundamental shift in how you think about finding talent.
It's realizing you're not just filling an empty chair. You're attracting someone motivated by opportunity, by impact, not just a bigger paycheck.
So here's something to chew on, maybe. Are your current hiring processes really geared towards attracting people who are running toward something amazing at your company?
Or are you mostly just catching folks who are running away from somewhere else?
Yeah.
It's worth thinking about. How could you apply some of these principles yourself?
Absolutely. And definitely stay tuned for our next deep dive. We'll keep unpacking hiring greatness, getting into the nitty-gritty of search research, interview techniques that actually work, deep due diligence, and the art of closing the deal.
We really only just scratched the surface of this roadmap to building your absolute dream team.
Thanks for listening. Visit our library and subscribe below for more book summaries. This has been a Sprint Reads production.